Can coffee cause eczema? The caffeinated truth. Today's agenda, we're going to be talking about my coffee addiction, the best resource on caffeine and its relation to dis-ease, coffee in your nervous system, coffee and fatigue, coffee in the GI tract, the caffeinated ADHD mind, caffeine and sleep issues, pesticides and mold, modern day slavery, quitting bean water. All of this has to do with how it's related to eczema and skin conditions. So, as you can see, this was me in university. That's when I went to American River College for my nursing degree. And I did not actually drink coffee at that time. I had seen when I was younger, my mom had a massive coffee addiction. She was drinking coffee every single day. She'd go to Starbucks, get a venti mocha, no foam, no whip, every single day, sometimes twice a day. And I did the math on how much coffee she was drinking, and it was over $3,000 a year she was spending on this substance. And I noticed it at a young age. I was like, I don't really want to get addicted to that. So I said, I'm not going to drink coffee. So that was me sleeping in nursing school. Most people were drinking coffee all the time. I was usually trying to sleep as much as possible in between really at any time I could get. This was me sleeping during class. A buddy took a picture of it. Here is me when I was a nurse. I actually started drinking coffee because I was so fatigued I couldn't get through the shift without it. And I was drinking up to 6 cups a day. I was constantly going to the break room getting more. And as you can see in this photo on the right, this was me with eczema. And as I drank more and more coffee, I began to notice my skin disease that I had when I was younger started coming back. And my stress levels, as they got higher, as I started drinking more coffee, my skin disease got worse and worse and worse. So what I learned when I was a nurse, I had a friend named Fade. He was a coworker. He was in his 40s. He told me about this book, The Caffeine Blues. And the crazy thing about Fade, he was like 45. He was super healthy, so much energy, and he wasn't drinking coffee. Myself and all of my other coworkers, we were all drinking coffee. And he told me, read this book. It will change your life. I don't drink coffee, and I have more energy than ever before. I bought the book, The Caffeine Blues, Wake Up to the Hidden Dangers of America's #1 Drug. And I read 2 chapters, and it was too confronting for me because I was so addicted to the substance. So I put the book down, and it wasn't until I got really sick with eczema that I read it again, and I was like, wow, I really have to stop drinking this. It's destroying me from the inside out. And a really interesting thing that I learned is with Native Americans, when the settlers came in and started taking the land, and of course there were agreements and different parts related to Native American culture and people coming in. But when they were doing trades, the white man would trade coffee with the Native Americans. And when they first started consuming it, the Native Americans actually called it false fire. So they realized, because they were so connected to their bodies, that the energy that they were getting from the cup of coffee was not real energy. It was false. And so they didn't really like it that much. Now, one of the big things I want to touch on in this presentation is coffee and your nervous system and how this relates to skin disease. So something that's really important to look into is the autonomic nervous system. And with autonomic nervous system, you have 2 branches. You have your parasympathetic and your sympathetic. Your sympathetic, you can think of it as your fight or flight system. Your fight or flight is a built-in mechanism in order to allow you to survive. If you think about our ancestors when they used to be running around on the Saharas, a tiger or a lion comes up and you got to be ready to run or to fight with a spear, right? So what ends up happening when you go into a sympathetic state, your pupils dilate so you can see better, blood shunts to your heart so you have an increased heartbeat. Blood flow is going more to the bigger organs that you need, like your heart, your brain. And then the other organs, like the liver, it will have an increase in its ability to convert glycogen to glucose so you can have more energy. And then your digestive system completely shuts down. Your adrenal glands start to produce adrenaline. Your bladder and urinary system shut down. Now, that is the state that we don't want to be in when we're trying to heal. If you have a skin disease and you're trying to heal, you do not want to be in fight or flight, because it's signaling to your body that you're not safe, and your body can't go into a repair mode. In order to go into a repair mode, we need to be in parasympathetic. With parasympathetic, this is essentially saying the lion is gone, we just killed it or it ran away, we're safe now, we can lay down and we can rest. And so with parasympathetic, your digestive organs and processes start to kick back in. Your pupils constrict. There's less of a need to survive and more of a need to relax your body. And this is extremely important because when you look at coffee, coffee's actually acting on which system do you think it acts on? Yep, it's the sympathetic. So it's putting you into a fight or flight. And it does this through a couple of mechanisms. So one of the big things related to coffee is looking at how coffee causes fatigue. And so the first thing is adenosine is a neurotransmitter that goes to your brain, right? And with neurotransmission, you have these receptors. And so what coffee does is it actually binds to the adenosine receptors and it blocks them. So if adenosine is floating around and it binds to a receptor, it will essentially signal to your body, we need rest, we're tired, we need to relax. But when coffee blocks this, your body doesn't get that feeling, just like a key turning in a lock, and the lock doesn't open. So what ends up happening is because this is blocked, your heart rate goes up, your neuronal activity increases, your need to sleep and your feeling of sleepiness decreases. And then you also have more vasodilation in your blood vessels. So the really important point about all of this is coffee is not actually making you more alert. It does make you more alert, but it makes you more alert because it's taking away the feeling of fatigue. The feeling of fatigue in our body is really important because it's telling us you actually can't push yourself that hard. So the really interesting thing when I was a nurse was I was so fatigued, and despite me not wanting to become addicted to coffee, I started drinking the coffee because I was so fatigued, and it blocked the feeling of fatigue so I could keep working, which actually started killing me a lot quicker. The other thing to look at when you drink coffee is stimulating the same mechanism of your adrenal gland. You have two adrenal glands on top of the kidneys. You have your right and your left, right? You have in the middle the adrenal medulla, and on the outside the adrenal cortex. So I believe the adrenal medulla is responsible for releasing norepinephrine and epinephrine, which is also known as adrenaline. And your adrenal cortex releases cortisol. Cortisol is your inflammation hormone. So when you're drinking coffee, you're blocking your brain's ability to feel fatigue. You're also increasing cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, which are your fight or flight hormones. So when you drink the coffee in the morning, it might feel like it's making you wake up, but you're just getting a huge dose of hormones that are telling you, I'm not safe in my body. The other thing about coffee is it is very acidic and it can damage your GI tract, especially if you're not having food in the morning. So a lot of people, they'll drink coffee first thing in the morning. If you have a skin disease, you should definitely not be doing this. If you are still addicted to coffee and you do feel you still need to consume it, you're absolutely going to want to at least have some food beforehand so that when the coffee comes in, the food is essentially a buffer to make sure that all this acidic beverage is not going to overwhelm the system. So in terms of what your GI tract is, it's your gastrointestinal tract. This flows from your mouth to your anus, okay? So from your mouth, down your esophagus, down your stomach, to your first small intestine, which is more in the middle, and then it flows and connects to your large intestine, all the way down to your rectum and your anus. That is the GI tract. And you can imagine it like a donut, okay? So you have this hole that connects all through a tube, and then you have the rest of your body. So the GI tract is actually, it's inside the body, but it's its own separate thing. And what ends up happening when you have increased intestinal permeability is, as you can see in the picture in the right, that increased intestinal permeability essentially means leaky gut. And what this means is that the intestinal wall, it's supposed to be very tight to keep everything inside the GI tract. But when you become super inflamed, it starts to open up and it becomes leaky. And this is increased intestinal permeability. It's not a good thing. And when it becomes leaky, when this opens, all the food, toxins, everything that's supposed to get wasted, it goes back into the body, into the circulation, and it causes a lot of issues. And your liver now has to process way more stuff. Your whole entire lymphatic system has to process way more stuff. And it's hard to differentiate between what needs to go and what needs to stay. So we absolutely do not want an inflamed intestinal tract. This is actually a huge cause for a lot of the clients we work with at the Skin Savers, is leaky gut. It causes a lot of issues with the skin. Coffee and focus. So a lot of people take coffee and they say they focus, but you can do a little trick here. You can spend one day sitting down, drinking your coffee, and see how much work you actually get done. And I'm not talking about just work. I'm talking about focused work. Being able to sit at your computer or read a book or whatever it is without flipping over to the next page or looking outside staring at the squirrels. Then try without coffee. And mind you, you'll have to try this when you're completely off coffee so you don't have the craving, and see how much more you can actually focus and pay attention. So I used to have ADHD. My brain was very inflamed in many aspects. I had leaky gut. I had all of these things going on. And I couldn't understand why I had so many issues getting things done. I could always start things, but by the end of the day, my new idea that I just came up with for a business or anything that I was going to do with my life, it was so incredible. I'd get started on that thing in the morning, and then by the end of night, I'd have another idea for another thing that I was going to start the next day. And this was a constant cycle for me for a long time, and I couldn't really figure it out. And if you look at the textbooks, I was definitely ADHD. And in this day and age, with cell phones, with coffee, with all of these different things, a lot of people are ADHD. The thing is, we want to be able to get our attention span to be focused on one thing at one time without having to do a lot of multitasking. Because when you're doing a lot of multitasking, what you're actually signaling to your body is that you're not safe, because you have to do all these things. And oftentimes when you're doing all these things, your body is not able to rest because you're constantly saying to your body, I have to get so much done. And so this is why so many people start to get really sick, because they're in fight or flight. And they're not able to just rest and sit down, have a meal without stimulation, without a cell phone, without anything. And this fight or flight is actually what causes more and more inflammation in the body and causes skin disease. Coffee and sleep. So caffeine absolutely will affect sleep. If you guys aren't ready to put the bean water down yet, I highly recommend, if you're going to consume coffee, consume it first thing in the morning. Don't have it in the afternoon. Don't have it at noon, because the quarter life of coffee is actually 12 hours. So when you consume a cup of coffee, the quarter life means in 12 hours, a quarter of that caffeine will still be in your system. So if you consumed 100 milligrams of caffeine, you'll still have 25 milligrams in your system 12 hours afterwards. So if you consume it at 8 a.m., at 8 p.m., you'll still have 25 milligrams in your system. And this is why a lot of people, they'll have coffee at like 11, 12, 1, and they'll be like, oh yeah, well, the half-life is 6 hours. The half-life of coffee, 6 hours after you consume it, half of it will be in your system. So the really interesting thing about all of this is, if you want to sleep well, you have to ensure, if you are going to drink coffee, do it first thing in the morning, so that your body can fully process it. And there's also a lot of people that we work with, if you look at their DNA results, they will show that their body's actually not able to metabolize coffee as well, and they have a higher propensity for anxiety related to coffee and caffeine. Pesticides, something to be very wary of. Most companies most coffee has a significant amount of pesticides on it. I won't read all these names for you. I can't even pronounce half of them. But the fact that I can't pronounce these names and I have a lot of knowledge on this, like propiconazole, permethrin, parathione methyl. What does any of this mean? And I've looked into many of these pesticides, but if you read something and you don't know what the ingredients are and you don't know what it does to the body, you should be very wary. This goes for everything. This goes for your food. If you read a box of food and it has a bunch of ingredients you don't know, you should do research on those ingredients before you ever put it into your body. And the crazy thing about this is in the US, there is no maximum residue level necessary to report. So if there's all of these pesticides on the coffee, the companies don't have to report that it's at a max dose. It would just have to report that it's in the coffee. And most people aren't asking these questions when they go and get their Starbucks. And so a lot of these pesticides can cause cancer, neurological effects, neurotoxicity, blood disorders, skin, eye, lung irritation, birth defects. At the end of the day, all of this stuff it's going to cause dysregulation in your body. And whenever you put a poison into your body is going to react in a really negative way. So we have to make sure at the Skin Savers that you are doing everything in your power to decrease the inflammation response you have and to get the toxin load out of your body. The number one thing I wish I had when I was going through skin disease and eczema was a community of people who had already figured out the problem, who could guide me through the steps and the processes needed in order to heal myself naturally. And lucky for you, if you are interested in a community like this, we actually have a school community where you can come in and learn education related to skin disease for a fraction of the price of what you're going to be paying doctors and all different types of practitioners in the future. So you can learn for yourself, heal for yourself, and be able to feel better a lot quicker without having to take pharmaceuticals for the rest of your life. So if you're interested in that, click on the description below and I will see you in the community. Moldy bean water. Numerous studies about how coffee has mycotoxins in it. Mycotoxins are molds. So you have aflatoxin B1 and ochratoxin A. If you are going to drink coffee, always buy organic. There's a lot of different companies out there that are really high quality. They don't have pesticides. They don't have mold. And ask companies you go to if they have organic coffee, if they've tested for pesticides, if they've tested for mycotoxins. You can say mold when you're talking about mycotoxins, but if they don't know how to answer this question, don't drink it. The sirens of slavery. So the interesting thing that I noticed related to Starbucks and Homer's Odyssey. So they had these in Homer's Odyssey. He had his men tie him to a post because there were these mystical creatures called sirens. They were women that were very seductive that would fly over with wings and play music and try and pull the captain or the men off the boat and drown them, right? And there's a lot of stories about this with mermaids as well, like mermaids that have pulled men off the boat and lured them into the waves. So the really interesting thing that I noticed with Starbucks is this was their original logo. It looks very similar to the sirens. I know this sounds like a conspiracy, and maybe it is, but I'm going to run with it. So the interesting thing about Starbucks, it's on every corner. Everyone drinks it. It's got pesticides. It's got mold. And ultimately, the interesting thing about the company is because everyone drinks coffee so much and it's so embedded in our culture, any movie you watch, you can see sometimes they'll have product placement of a Starbucks cup. Everyone talks about drinking coffee all the time. And it's great for Starbucks because they get a lot of business and they make a lot of money. But when you're looking at this photo on the right of this guy running towards the retirement stick with death, holding it, essentially what happens for a lot of people that I've seen is they're chasing making a lot of money, and they're chasing trying to live this life that they don't actually want because society told them that they need to work until they're 65 and then they can finally retire. And I'll tell you this, You do not want to be 65 and then finally going to travel and go do a bunch of incredible things. You want to do that while you're young. Like I'm 30 years old right now. I'm going to Europe in a couple days to go do a Euro tour. I'm not going to be able to do that when I'm 65 in the same way that I can do it now. And so how this all ties together is when I was drinking coffee, I was so numb to what I actually wanted because all I was thinking about was working. That's all I cared about was working so I could make enough money so I could finally make it. And this is why coffee is sold everywhere. I'm not saying that people are trying to ruin people's lives, but coffee is such a lucrative thing to sell because how does someone get somebody to stay in a cubicle or a hospital or a very unnatural place staring at a screen doing busy work for over 8 hours a day? You give them something that numbs them. And so when you're numb, you can't feel fatigue and you'll just keep working. And the thing that sucks about how the world works related to the corporate environment is if I were to ever work for a company again, I would work for a company that says, hey, if it takes you 2 hours to get your work done today, that's good. And then you can go home. And that actually incentivizes people to do the work correctly rather than to just sit around and twiddle their thumbs and drink more coffee. So if you want to quit the bean water, by the way, coffee is a bean and you're heating up beans and drinking it. So if you never thought of it that way. Couple ways to quit. One, you can go cold turkey. This is a method I recommend. If you want to do it, you just do it. You get it done. It takes a week or two. You just come off the coffee. You experience a lot of sometimes symptoms depending on how much you were drinking. And it can be very painful because you just pulled this thing away that actually causes addiction. And if you can sit through this and you can get through it and you can stay away from consuming coffee, this is the best way to go. The foolproof method, though, a lot of people say, oh yeah, slowly taper off and then go down to tea. By the time you're doing all of that and it takes 2-3 months, oftentimes you'll lose the motivation that you had in the beginning to quit it in the first place and you'll get sucked back into the addiction cycle. So what I recommend, take 5 organic coffee beans. On the first day you choose to quit, pop them in your mouth, suck on them when you're feeling the craving that you need the caffeine. And then you can just take them out whenever you want. And then the next day or a couple days later, you can go down to 4 and then 3 and then 2 and then 1. So all you're doing is sucking on the bean and that'll still give you that feeling, but it'll be at a lower level. And then by the time you're finally off of needing to suck on the beans, you're good to go and you will not experience all the symptoms that you would have experienced cold turkey. So the hardest thing that I've found with clients and other people who've done this is just the mindset. The mindset related to coffee is you have to think about it this way. How are you taking it to numb or soothe yourself? And I used to take coffee to soothe myself by numbing my body and to put me into a state where I felt productive. Even when I stopped drinking it, when I first started my eczema healing journey, I would find myself sometimes getting sucked back into, oh yeah, when I drink this, I'm just going to have one once a week, one espresso and I'll be good. And I'd drink it and then I'd slowly 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, I'd be drinking every day. And so you have to be really aware of how you're using this to numb and soothe your cravings. If you can identify, oh yeah, right now I really want some coffee and I'm about to go buy some, and you can figure out why or where in your body is trying to pull you into drinking that cup even though you don't want it, you'll start to understand your emotions better. So in summary, does coffee or caffeine cause eczema? Well, the short answer is it doesn't cause it. The long answer is it is something that can increase the symptoms, right? So I haven't worked with anyone personally who we cut out coffee and their eczema just goes away, because oftentimes the coffee is an additional layer to something that's causing the eczema, something like leaky gut or liver dysfunction. When you remove the coffee, you get closer and closer to being able to address all of the issues that are going on related to inflammation in the body. We've covered the effects of coffee on the body, the really big things. You cannot rest in your body and recover if you're in a constant state of fight or flight. And something I want to instill in you guys is restoring the body back to baseline does take patience. So if you want help with this journey, it can be a relatively long road for people depending on how they think. So some people do believe that the world is like the way the pharmaceutical companies have created how we think about results. I'll just pop a pill and I'll be good. That's not how reality works. With nature, if you've damaged your body for a long period of time, it is going to take some time to heal. But with our community, our aim is to provide education for cheap for people to be able to get results as quickly as possible. So I've been able to distill the methods I use to heal within like a year down to a much quicker process for people where they can get results much quicker. So if you're interested in joining us in our school community, go to school.com/skinsavers. And the next video that you will see on YouTube is related to creams. So click this if you want to learn more about the creams to avoid that a lot of people are putting on their skin. Think like Cetaphil. They're putting this on their skin to moisturize when at the end of the day, it's not doing a lot, and oftentimes it causes more issues. So I go all into the creams that I recommend to stay away from, that I wasted money on. I spent so much money trying to figure out what creams actually worked. And then I'll give you a really simple solution for a type of cream that you can use. It's more of a salve that will help decrease the inflammation on your body while you're healing internally. So that's it for the day, guys. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.